Wirral on the website publish exactly where we are up to every single one of the constituency committees. In respect to the point about moving from red to amber, of course, what you're referring to is the report from Mike and his colleagues about the last financial year. Not the current financial year, the last financial year. And clearly, when we identified in September £17 million potential overspends and a whole range of bad debts, which we called in Eugene Sullivan to look at. Clearly, the District Audit Committee couldn't give us a clean bill of health the way we managed last year's accounts, because clearly that has occurred at the beginning of last year. If you read the report of audit, that's why it says moving towards amber. What it does say in the last 6 months of the year, from September onwards, there were significant efforts made managerially and financially and by members to correct that situation and improve the management of the council's budget. So, Mike can speak to himself, but certainly the auditors were not able to give us a clean bill of health for the whole of last year, because clearly the council was in a mess for large parts of last year and was improving. Now, we think, because instead of having a £17 million overspend on current financial monitoring last month, we're showing a £590,000 underspend. To me, we demonstrate that we are managing our finances a lot better this year, and hopefully when Mike and our colleagues do the report, the equivalent report for this current year, they'll say we're in a far stronger position than we were. So, in fact, we're not red, we're moving red to amber, because the last 6 months of last year showed improvement. And I think what I've said to you by indicating the way we're controlling this year's budget, we are continuing to demonstrate that improvement. So I think that's a nice point out, unless Mike wants to add to that at all.
I think many of these things are a judgment call. Are the arrangements in place, are they going to deliver what you want the outcomes to be? And I mean, the decision we took was that certainly during last year, because it is looking backwards in terms of the audit process, it was described as red, but there were signs that things were moving in the right direction. Now it's interesting that, I mean, the point that Joyce has just made, that when we come back in March, we will be in a position as an improvement call, as it were, to sort of say, has the budget now been satisfactorily agreed for the year, and does that look as if the savings plans, etc., are going to be achievable. So, you know, again, it will be a judgment call on that. But in terms of as external auditors, we will still take a view on that during the year, and next September we will do another report which looks back in terms of 13-14 and gives a view on the situation over that period of time. So it will be, I mean, in terms of the improvement board going away, in a sense I'm an observer to the improvement board because I am the external auditor, but there will still be an external audit process which comments on some elements of, you know, the wider stuff that the improvement board looks at, so certainly around financial monitoring, management and value for money arrangements, then that there will still be a process for that being done going forward.
I wanted Chair to slightly interrupt the process, because someone's indicating on the financial side around it. Do you have any supplementary on that financial point?
Not on the financial.
Okay.
No.
I will exceptionally let you in. I must make sure those who publish get to ask their questions.
I'd like to ask Mr. Thomas, a lot of the emphasis here is on the governance. Is it true that you're still withholding the whole of government certificate from Wirral Borough Council for the year 2013?
We're not. There is a certificate that needs signing at the end of the process. There are various.
So it hasn't been signed.
It's not been signed yet, but I'm in the process of considering of signing that, because some of the outstanding issues are starting to bring forward.
Yeah, because when I spoke to you, and I did speak to Ms. Temple-Murray, you said that one of the features that hadn't been resolved with governance was the interminable delay in dealing with a rather small matter of big and ISIS, which has been rumbling on since June 2011.
I think we've covered that, and I think the Chief Executive has said where that report has got to now.
Yeah, but I mean, for example, his response to the critical reports says really nothing that wasn't said in the press statement of March 2013, and we are 8 months on. And in fact, I have actually exploded some of the apologia that the council put in their big abbreviated summary in detail.
Okay. I wanted to let you in because it was a particular point, but I am interrupting the flow of someone whose questions are already been proposed. So we'll move on to the next
I
point.
think the final point, oh no, not final point, final point on this page, anyway, is the issue about the ICO and the FOI request. What we're saying to this is that we voluntarily agreed with the ICO to sign an undertaking to answer 85% of FOIs within set timescales, and I signed that document on behalf of the council. The council, as adhered to the guidelines, and fully committed to continue to improve the response time, because, to be honest, frankly, I don't think 85% is good enough, right? And I aspire to well above 85%. Certainly, we are exceeding that target at the moment, and I fully intend, as explained, the ways we're monitoring it, to make sure we continue to do that.
Do you want to come back on the FOI points?
I've wanted to say I'm heartened to hear that there's higher aspiration than responding to 85%. That's fantastic. I would hope that there is some target there to actually respond and not be challenged. I think it's always important that, you know, I put out any response I like to any question. If it's not, if it doesn't stand or hold water, and it's unfortunate. It's no good firing garbage out quickly. Just on the equality impact assessment, because that was addressed earlier, or is this something to say?
Yeah.
Okay, in respect to the neighbourhood working comment made, what I'm saying is clearly the council only agreed to adopt the constituency model a relatively short time ago, and in fact has made very quick progress towards implementing it. I have experienced this when we did it in my former authority. It took us a couple of years to implement because we need to engage with people very thoroughly. Now this council has moved very quickly in terms of the constituency model, and actually it's being held up as good practice by a number of bodies externally. But certainly the council, particularly the members, are very committed to this model and are pressing me very strongly to ensure we do deliver increasingly devolved services. And if you recall at the last cabinet meeting, an in-principle decision, subject to detailed discussion with members, decision was made to devolve more services around antisocial behaviour, community safety and street scene to those area committees going forward next year. Now, the discussions with the detail how we do that with members and with the existing committees, but there's a decision made that direction of travel is important, and I'm sure there'll be other services. In fact, Phil has asked for a report to the January Cabinet to see what other services could be sent out to those constituency committees. So, council direction of travel is strong, and it is actually moving quite quickly compared to my experience elsewhere. But certainly it's got some way to go, and it's only still in its infancy, and as you pointed out, there will be a number of glitches which we'll need to iron out over the next 6 months and a year, and probably after a year's time, do a full review of that way of working and see whether it's satisfactory. In terms of the quality impact assessment, my understanding is that, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that the quality impact assessment referred to was completed for the concept of neighbourhood working, it's a broad principle concept. Additional EIAs will be completed for all the new constituency plans as they are developed, and also be completed for any future budget allocations as well. So the EIAs have been done on a broad principle and will be done as we move along the path. The terms of reference for all committees state they must, as I said earlier, reflect the council's priority to reduce inequalities. As with earlier, we expect the existing committee's budget to rise in the next financial year, and the influence over both our services and other public services also to increase during the year.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to come back on that?
Please, if I may. I'm a lay person, just for clarity, and I've not perhaps as long as someone would like to scrutinise and analyse the document, but in the time that I did have, I did look at this, and again, I'm not opposed to neighbourhood working, and I'm not opposed to constituency committees. I think you could actually work and actually be of benefit to the people of Wirral and give genuine involvement and engagement, but it has to be genuine. Where I have a bit of concern is, it seems to me, as a layperson, that there's almost a schoolboy error. If you allocate a very small amount of money, 200,000, and again, this isn't me crying out Birkenhead wants more money, because that's not the point that I'm trying to make. I want more money for the community I live in, but this isn't about that. If you allocate it in the way it's been done, as agreed by council, as signed off in an equality impact assessment, which doesn't appear to grasp the issue, we have roughly 79,000 people in Birkenhead. Wirral West will have around about 69,000 a lead. If you divide the money equally and then break it to per head of capita, then less money per head of capita is spent in Birkenhead. Birkenhead has far greater ethnic diversity than Wirral West. Therefore, indirectly, and without any intent, I'm not suggesting, but indirectly there is the potential for discrimination. And that would apply not just on the grounds of race or ethnic origin, but it could apply in terms of age. I haven't analysed and wrote those numbers. I was scribbling on the back of a fag packet, as it were. Yeah. So, and it comes down to pennies. But if I as a resident of Birkenhead, have 8 pence less spent through neighbourhood, through constituency committees, on me,
well made.
Than someone in Wirral West, I am more likely to be non-white, then I think there may be a challenge there. Now, you know, it's schoolboy error in my view.
Okay, let's stick to reply, and you made your point really well in terms of the allocation of funding.
You're quite correct. What happened was the council decided they wanted to set up these committees and set them quickly and get them moving. So for the sake of simplicity, they simply said a seed corn money just for the first 6 months of the year, that's all it is really since they've been established. They should be allocated the same amount each, £50,000 each, just a seed corn money. It's clear the intention, as I said earlier, next year, and I'm sure there's something in the budget going forward about how we allocate the amount of money and also the services which they can influence will be referred to the council budget. So I'm sure there'll be changes going forward. But the view was just for the first 6 months to get off the ground, allocate that money, and that was a broad brush approach, and it was basically done on the constituency committees are broadly the same size. There's 10,000 difference between one and the other. In terms of the pence per head, it is pence per head, and that will be looked at. And I think that's a valid point, which I'm sure Jeff and Tom and Phil will consider next year about the allocation. I think it's a useful point to consider, Chair.
Okay, I am going to keep moving.
Just very quickly, are you saying it's okay to discriminate this year?
I didn't hear him say that. I said that it was done on a rough split and that the populations are similar, but the point is taken on board in terms of looking at next year.
That's the investigating the potential discrimination that's involved in the allocation of money, and that's not for the board, and I can write in separately, and I can say a questionnaire or wish, but really look at it, because you can't promote inequality by tackling inequality by making things more unequal. It's just ridiculous. It just makes you look like a fool.
Okay, I think the point is absolutely taken, and you did make your point well.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and your responses.
Thank you. Nigel? Yeah. Oh, right. Sorry.
I'll have the microphone.
Okay. We are.
I'm going to read out the question.
Yeah. I think we can take them as read.
No, I'd like to read it out, if I can.
Okay, yeah.
In your report, page 53, section 184, you write that you are, quotation, the first sector-led improvement approach taken to support a council facing significant governance issues. In the potted biographies of Joyce Redfern, it is written, she has served on 2 previous improvement boards for Glenelg Gwent and for Liverpool. What then happened at Glenelg Gwent and Liverpool? I interpret sector-led as being led by a peer group, rather like the police supervising or investigating themselves. What was different about Mrs. Redfern's prior appointments to boards?
Okay, it's actually, and I apologise, it does seem rather confusing. This one is actually the sector itself choosing, and the sector being the local government sector. At the time that the other two boards existed, it was under an audit commission statutory regime, where actually the mechanism of an improvement board was used, but it was an imposed approach rather than a voluntary approach.
So in my supplementary, what made you decide that Wirral should be a sector-led, the first one ever, rather than imposed upon? Because the series of scandals was so, it was like an abyss. You would imagine that you would impose,
if I can pick up, I understand entirely where you're going with the point. I think that it is really fundamental, and if you read on in 185, one of the things that feels very different in working within this board has been that it has been very much a joint board of the council and external, including LGA nominated representatives. So actually it's been working with the willing as opposed to an imposition externally, and that is because the actual audit framework has shifted, national policy, national changes in terms of how that is delivered. So we're working in a very different environment. Do you want to say anything?
The only thing I would say, it was part of the audit commission's regime, but it was the inspection side of the regime that disappeared a year or two ago.
Yeah.
And the potential for what was called the corporate governance inspection in those times went sort of 12, 15 months ago. So there was a definite shift towards sort of sector-led, which is what Joyce has explained.
Yeah. My last comment on it would be that when Mr. Burgess pointed out that the council had set aside £33,660 2 years ago, and you refer to yourself as critical friends, quite clearly you cannot do much forensic work on the improvement of the council, given even that some of your salaries are paid by the LGA. Because £33,660 for 2 years is a very small amount of money.
I think we made clear, and the LGA have made clear, that their costs are not recharged to the council.
Yeah, I understand that, and I've mentioned that in my statement. It just seems that it seems a very paltry amount for the council to set aside towards improving itself when it trumpets its progress so far and wide. 33,000 divided by 2 is something like 16,500 or 16,800 for each year.
I think that it's the mainstream budget that counts, and that has been in the time of the political leaders, in the time of the chief exec, in the time of the senior management team. It's part of the day job of the council rather than a specific budget that we're talking about.
Yeah, it's quite, and the last thing I will say on this is it's quite interesting that the council repeatedly refers to a bill of £250,000 for the Anna Kolowski Associates report, which of course is contradicted on its own website by the £416,000 paid to Anna Kolowski Associates on its payments over £500 within the same timescale as the report was produced. So it's prepared to spend or be forced to spend £416,000, but it's only going to allocate £33,000 to improving itself.
And the answer for us, the chair of the board, is I think that's an unfair comparison, that it's been using its mainstream budget for the improvement board, and that, you know, that is where we've seen the benefit.
It's just a comparison. Anyway, my question two. Your report refers to external reports 2010 to 2012. Though, by contrast, Wirral Borough Council writes a response to critical external reports 2010 to 2013, not 12. Given that those reports included 2 from Grant Thornton in 2013, which showed alarming deficiencies in the award of business startup grants, both in working neighbourhoods, in BIG, and in ISIS, how can you make a statement that the economy was then an area of excellence for WBC, even under the difficult conditions to which you allude. This is not a complaint regarding those investigations, but a query of on what authority can you print such an assertion, faced with knowledge of, and certainly published in a big abbreviated summary, the deep failures of scrutiny over the whole process shown by Wirral Borough Council at that time.
Thank you. Right.
This will say that I mean, the rights of these reports can be published because they don't necessarily
They do.
support.
But I've spoken to the police. They do.
Well,
they say it's riddled with fraud. That's 2 police officers coming to my house in July of this year.
Following the council referring it to them for investigation. And of course,
But forced.
Could you let the reply
Yes.
come, please?
And of course, what the council did, of course, was bring in external people in to do that, not because we were forced to, because we thought it was right to do that. If you remember, I started work here on the 3rd of September, and we made the decision to bring external people in within a few weeks of that. Perhaps shows my approach and the approach of the leader, and indeed the other party leaders as well. And I would also argue that there are other people who are the council bodies and external auditors of this matter, not just the council. And we also refer the matter to their government departments as well. I'd also point out that, of course, the matters you refer to are matters which were dealt with between companies external to the council. And I'll re-emphasise once again, the reports from the auditors, independent reports, found no fault with the council officers. Now, to go on to the reason why to make the assertion that this is an area of excellence, you quote one, in terms of financial terms, in terms of the council's overall budget and activity, relatively small but important area. In contrast to that, this council won a national award by the local Chronicle for its economic development, recognised nationally as the best in the country. It's gained millions of pounds, particularly most recently £5 million for regional growth fund for sustainable energy, offshore wind. It's got the best figures in Merseyside in terms of tackling youth unemployment, and the best figures in Merseyside in terms of the creation of new businesses. I believe Birkenhead was the best area in the country for creation of new business startups. The tourism economy is growing at over 4% a year, which is the fastest growth of any northwest local authority. And in 8 consecutive months, there's been falling job seekers allowance with 1,543 less claimants over the last 12 months. Also, this council has taken a leading role in the creation of the combined authority for Greater Merseyside to make sure we have strong governance procedures in place for delivering economic regeneration. Some people will agree with that, some people won't, but certainly it's recognised as being the way forward by many of national bodies. So I think I can demonstrate, more than demonstrate, the excellent performance, especially when you consider our investment in regeneration is that one of the lowest investments in regeneration on any council in the country, but was some of the best results of any council in the country. So I will more than defend that statement. This council has excellent regeneration ambitions, more than the largest regeneration project in the country, the Plan Commission, Wirral Waters, which is again is seen as a highlight in terms of government when it was awarded the first economic regeneration zone. So yes, we take the big ISIS issues seriously. We investigate this independently. There'll be lessons to learn from it, but in comparison to the other activities of the council, it's got to be seen in a broader perspective.
Right. My supplementary question would be, can you tell us how much at a fee of £250 or so an hour did you pay Grant Thornton to investigate separately the big and independently the ISIS that enabled them in a span possibly of 100 hours to decide that no council officers were to blame? It may say that they could find no evidence, but when you're faced with the facts outlined in those reports, you can only imagine that there must be fault with the councillors.
Yeah, I think we won't move into making any allegations or surmising. Thank you.
Well, I do actually, to shock you, I do actually have in my possession something that will contradict that.
Yeah, that is, it's not for me to investigate individual issues or complaints. Those are the business of the council. Today we're reviewing. Has the council made progress? Can you recognise what's in the report? Is that progress with its next steps therefore sufficient for the council to move on?
No.
Well, the
No,
Chief
I
Executive
agree with
answer
that.
the question anyway.
But
Please.
I can also say, because what I can't do is allow anybody to say there are other matters we haven't investigated. I will ask you now, personally, at the end of this meeting, to give me any further information you have, and we will investigate that as well. Because that's the way this council works now. If you've got information, give it to us, and we'll investigate. You can't investigate things you haven't got. Give us the stuff, and we will investigate.
Graham, for 1 year, your internal audit department buried the stuff that was given to them by your own admission. Your own internal audit department buried the facts that were given to them for 1 full
Okay, I am
year.
as chair going to ask Graham to sit down.
Thank you, Chair.
And I am going to move on. I think that if there are further allegations or further information, you now have a very clear, please bring that forward, share it with the Chief Executive at the end of the meeting, because unless he's aware of things, he can't move them forward.
I whistle blew 868 days ago about Big and ISIS.
Okay. Did you get a response?
868 days.
Did you get a response?
I haven't had an answer, a solution.
No, I said, did you get a response?
What is